I'd always thought my marriage was solid, no fireworks, maybe, but solid. Emily and I had been together for 8 years. We had our routines, our little inside jokes, and our shared dreams about starting a family. The latter was the sore spot, though. No matter how much we tried, kids never came into the picture. After a year of tests, consultations, and quiet frustration, the doctors finally gave it a name: infertility. On my end, Emily cried when we got the news. I did too, in my own way, but I promised her we'd get through it. Adoption, surrogacy, whatever it took. I thought we were still in this together. Turns out I couldn't have been more wrong. A few weeks ago, Emily dropped a bombshell. She was pregnant. At first, I was too stunned to process what she was saying. I mean, I knew the facts, medically, biologically, scientifically, this wasn't possible. But there she was, sitting across from me with a nervous smile, holding a positive test in her trembling hands. "It's a miracle, isn't it?" she said, her voice shaky but hopeful. I didn't answer right away. I just stared at her, my mind working overtime to connect dots that didn't add up. "A miracle?" I finally asked, my tone colder than I intended. "Or something else?" Her face fell. "What are you saying, Tom? You don't believe me?" I didn't respond. Couldn't. Instead, I got up, walked to the kitchen, and poured myself a whiskey. My hands were shaking so bad I nearly dropped the glass. That night I didn't sleep. My mind was a storm of suspicion, denial, and rage. I went through every possible explanation, but they all led me back to the same ugly conclusion. Someone else had to be the father. The next morning, I confronted her. I didn't tiptoe around it or try to cushion the blow. "Whose kid is it, Emily?" I demanded. Her face turned ghostly white. "Tom, you're being ridiculous. It's yours. Don't lie to me." I slammed my fist on the table, making her jump. "You think I'm stupid? You think I don't know how this works? Who is he?" She started crying, big dramatic sobs that might have swayed me once. "But not now. Not after this. Tom, please," she begged, reaching for my hand. "I love you. I'd never." I pulled away like her touch burned. "Stop lying. You're pregnant and it's not mine. That means one thing, Emily." She didn't deny it this time. Her silence was all the confirmation I needed. My blood boiled, and I felt a surge of anger so intense it scared even me. "You're gonna tell me who he is?" I said, my voice low and dangerous. "And if you don't, I'll find out myself." She shook her head frantically. "Please, Tom, don't do this. It was a mistake. A stupid, horrible mistake. It didn't mean anything." "Oh, it's gonna mean something," I snapped. "It's gonna mean everything to him when I show up." Emily's tears kept falling, but I didn't care. My mind was already racing, piecing together a plan. Whoever this guy was, he'd made the biggest mistake of his life, and he was about to pay for it. Emily refused to say a word about him. She clammed up, as if keeping his name secret would protect him from what was coming. She didn't understand. I wasn't the kind of man to let things slide. Not now, not ever. If she thought I'd give up and let this go, she didn't know me at all. The house felt suffocating. Her presence like a bad smell I couldn't escape. I couldn't even look at her without my blood boiling. So I stopped talking, stopped eating meals with her. Every time she tried to start a conversation, I gave her the coldest silence I could muster. She begged me to talk, to forgive her, but forgiveness wasn't in the cards. I needed answers, and if she wouldn't give them to me, I'd find them myself. The first thing I did was go through her phone. She'd always been protective of it, keeping it locked with a password. But I wasn't a fool. I'd seen her unlock it enough times to know the code. Late one night, when she was asleep, I grabbed it from her nightstand and stepped out onto the porch. I scrolled through her messages first. Nothing. She must have deleted everything. But she wasn't as smart as she thought. People always leave traces. The call logs were cleaner than I expected, but I spotted one number that showed up more often than any other. No name attached. Copied it down. The next stop was her email. That was harder. She'd logged out of her account, and I didn't know the password. Fine. I'd deal with that later. Her social media didn't give me much either. No suspicious messages, no obvious signs of an affair. But when I scrolled through her photos, something caught my eye. A picture from a few months back, taken at a barbecue we'd hosted. She was standing next to someone, him. I recognized the guy immediately. His name was Brandon. He was a co-worker of hers. Some smug, pretty boy type who thought he was God's gift to the world. I'd met him a few times and I'd never liked him. Now I knew why. My hands tightened around the phone as I stared at his face. This was the guy who'd decided it was a good idea to mess with another man's wife. This was the guy who thought he could sneak around behind my back and get away with it. I went back inside, put the phone down where I'd found it, and stared at Emily sleeping peacefully in our bed. How could she look so innocent after what she'd done? How could she lie there, carrying another man's child, and act like nothing had changed? That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the living room, running through scenarios in my head. I didn't just want to confront Brandon. I wanted him to regret ever being born. But first I needed more proof. Something concrete. Something I could throw in his face before I made him pay. The next morning, I told Emily I had an early meeting and left the house before sunrise. I wasn't going to work, though. I had a different destination in mind, Brandon's office. It was time to find out just how much he'd risked for his little fling. And I was about to make him regret every second of it. Brandon's office was in a sleek downtown building, the kind of place where every desk was cluttered with motivational quotes and overpriced coffee cups. I parked across the street, watching the entrance like a hunter staking out prey. It didn't take long for him to show up, punctual, polished, and completely oblivious to the storm heading his way. I followed him inside, keeping a safe distance. He greeted the receptionist with that trademark grin I'd seen at the barbecue, the kind that probably made people trust him. Not me. I wasn't here for small talk or handshakes. I was here to peel back his perfect little life and let him know he'd messed with the wrong man. Once he disappeared down the hallway, I waited a few minutes before making my move. Finding his office was easy. His name was right there on the frosted glass door. I walked in without knocking. "Hey, can I help you?" Brandon looked up from his computer, his smile faltering when he saw me. I shut the door behind me and locked it. "You know who I am?" He blinked, leaning back in his chair. Yeah. You're Emily's husband, right?" "Smart guy," I said, stepping closer. "Let's see how smart you are when I'm done with you." He stood up, trying to play it cool. "Look, I don't know what you think this is about." "Don't." I cut him off, my voice low and sharp. "Don't insult my intelligence. I know about you and Emily. I know about the kid. So let's skip the part where you act surprised and get straight to the part where you start explaining." His face turned pale, and he held up his hands like I was pointing a gun at him. "Tom, listen, man. You don't get to call me man," I snapped, slamming my hand down on his desk. "You think I don't know what you've been doing? Sleeping with my wife, knocking her up, and acting like nothing's wrong." He stammered, sweat beading on his forehead. "It wasn't supposed to happen like this." That was all I needed to hear. In 2 long strides, I was in front of him, grabbing him by the collar. What was it supposed to be? Huh? A fun little game? A chance to screw over some other guy without consequences? "Please," he choked out, his hands clutching at mine. She said you'd never find out." "Wrong answer," I growled, shoving him back into his chair. He landed hard, knocking over a stack of papers. "You think I'm just gonna let this go? You think you can ruin my life and walk away scot-free?" Brandon looked like a cornered animal, his eyes darting around the room for an escape. "It was a mistake," he blurted out. "I swear, Tom, it didn't mean anything. She came to me. She said you guys were having problems, that she needed someone to talk to." "Talk?" I barked out a laugh. "Is that what you call it? You're telling me she tripped and landed in your bed?" He didn't answer, and that only made me angrier. I wanted to wipe that pathetic look off his face, to make him feel the same betrayal I felt. But I wasn't done yet. "I'm not finished with you," I said, my voice cold as steel. "You're gonna tell me everything. When it started, how long it went on, every disgusting little detail. And when you're done, you're gonna regret every second you spent with her. Brandon swallowed hard, his bravado completely gone. Okay, he whispered. Okay, I'll tell you. Just, please don't hurt me. I leaned in close, my voice barely more than a whisper. Oh, I'm not making any promises. Brandon sat there, trembling like a kid caught stealing candy, and for a second, I wondered how someone so weak could have the guts to betray me. Then again, cowards always operate in the shadows. He didn't have to be strong, just sneaky. Start talking, I barked, towering over him. And don't even think about sugarcoating it. It started a few months ago, he stammered, his voice barely above a whisper. At one of the company happy hours. Emily was different that night. Said she felt lonely, like you two had grown apart. I clenched my fists, feeling the heat rise in my chest. So what? You thought you'd play the hero? Be the guy to comfort her? No. I mean, yes, but I didn't plan it. Okay? His eyes darted to the door, probably hoping someone would walk in and save him. She kissed me first. I swear. I didn't even think it would go that far. I slammed my fist onto his desk, sending his coffee mug crashing to the floor. And yet, it did. He flinched, nodding quickly. It only happened a couple of times. I swear. She called it off after that. Said she loved you and couldn't keep doing it. Oh, how noble. I sneered. She cheats on me, gets pregnant, and suddenly remembers she's married. Give me a break. Brandon shook his head, his hands gripping the arms of his chair like he was holding on for dear life. I didn't know she was pregnant until now. If I had, you'd what? I cut him off, my voice venomous. Step up and play daddy? Leave me out here looking like a fool while you two played house. No, he shouted, tears pooling in his eyes. I didn't want any of this, Tom. It was a mistake. That's all it was. I stared at him, my chest heaving with rage. A mistake. That's all he could call it. As if his so-called mistake hadn't shattered my life into a million pieces. But as I stood there, something clicked. Brandon was too much of a coward to come clean on his own. If Emily had ended things like he said, then why was she so desperate to protect him? Why wouldn't she just admit the truth and let me take it out on him? Unless there was more. I leaned down, bringing my face inches from his. Tell me something, Brandon. Was she the only one you were sleeping with? Or do you make a habit of screwing around? What? He gasped, his face twisting in shock. No, it was just her, I swear. I straightened up, pacing the room as pieces of the puzzle shifted in my mind. Brandon wasn't lying, at least not completely. But he wasn't telling me everything either. Something about his panic felt off, like he was hiding something even bigger. Here's the deal, I said, stopping in front of him. You're gonna hand over your phone. Right now. What? He stammered, shaking his head. Why? Because I'm done taking your word for anything, I snapped. And if you've got nothing to hide, you won't mind me taking a look. He hesitated, his eyes darting to the phone on his desk. That hesitation was all the confirmation I needed. I grabbed the phone before he could react, unlocking it with the same casual ease I'd used on Emily's. Brandon lunged forward, but I shoved him back into the chair with one hand. Sit down, I growled. We're doing this my way. As I scrolled through his messages, I found what I was looking for faster than I'd expected. A thread of texts between him and someone labeled E. Not Emily, no. This E wasn't my wife. It was someone else entirely. I read the messages, my anger morphing into something darker. Brandon hadn't just been sleeping with Emily. He'd been juggling multiple affairs, one of which had its own messy complications. And as I read further, a name popped up in the conversation that sent a chill down my spine. A name I knew. This wasn't just about Brandon. There was someone else in this mess. Someone I hadn't expected. And suddenly, Emily's fear made a lot more sense. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening on Brandon's phone. The name I saw in the texts wasn't just some random fling or another woman he'd been stringing along. No, this name was personal, and it hit me like a freight train. It was Emily's sister, Samantha. The texts were explicit, shameless, and painted a picture of a man who thrived on deception. Brandon wasn't just a cheater, he was a master manipulator. He'd been playing Emily and Samantha against each other, probably thinking he could keep them both in his pocket without anyone finding out. "Explain this," I said, shoving the phone in his face. My voice was ice cold, but my insides were boiling. "You've been screwing her sister too?" Brandon's face went from pale to ghostly white. It's not what it looks like," he stammered, his words tripping over themselves. "Oh, it's exactly what it looks like," I shot back, my voice rising. "You've been sleeping with both of them, haven't you? You really thought you could keep this quiet?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The coward didn't even have the guts to deny it. I paced the office, trying to make sense of it all. Emily had been protecting him, yes, but not just out of guilt. She must have known about Samantha, or at least suspected. That's why she'd been so desperate to keep me from digging deeper. She wasn't just afraid of what I'd do to Brandon. She was afraid of the fallout with her own family. "What's the matter?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Cat got your tongue? Or are you too busy thinking about how screwed you are?" Brandon finally found his voice, but it wasn't the response I expected. "Tom, listen to me. This isn't just about me, okay? There's more to this." I stopped in my tracks, narrowing my eyes. "More? Like what?" He hesitated, his eyes darting toward the phone like it was some kind of lifeline. "You don't understand. If you go after me, you'll be dragging a lot of people into this." "People who? People who what?" I snapped, cutting him off. "Who lied to me? Who helped you destroy my marriage? Stop playing games and spit it out." Brandon slumped back in his chair, his confidence completely deflated. "It's not just me, okay? Samantha knew about Emily. She encouraged it." For a moment, the room felt like it was spinning. Samantha knew? She encouraged it? What kind of twisted family drama had I stumbled into? "Why?" I demanded, stepping closer. "Why would she do that?" Brandon looked down at his hands, too ashamed to meet my eyes. "Because she hated you. She always thought you weren't good enough for Emily. She figured if Emily had someone else, it'd push you out of the picture." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Samantha had been working against me from the start, sabotaging my marriage while pretending to be supportive. And Brandon, spineless, pathetic Brandon, had gone along with it because it suited him. "You think this excuses you?" I growled, my voice shaking with fury. "You think this makes you less of a scumbag?" "No," he muttered. "I know what I did was wrong, but I'm telling you, if you go after me, this whole thing's gonna blow up. Emily, Samantha, their parents. Everyone's gonna get dragged into it." "Good," I said, my voice like steel. "Let it blow up. They deserve it." I tossed the phone onto the desk, turning on my heel. Brandon started to say something else, but I didn't wait to hear it. I was done listening to his excuses. As I walked out of the office, a new plan began to form in my mind. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about exposing the entire mess for what it was. If Emily and Samantha thought they could play games with my life, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The drive home was a blur, my mind racing as I pieced everything together. Emily, Samantha, Brandon. All of them had played their parts in this twisted betrayal. But if they thought I'd just lie down and let them get away with it, they didn't know me at all. When I walked into the house, Emily was waiting for me, her face pale and anxious. She must have sensed that something had changed. "Tom," she began, her voice trembling. "Where have you been?" "I've been trying to save it," I snapped, cutting her off. "We're way past apologies, Emily." Her eyes widened and she took a step back. "What do you mean?" "I talked to Brandon," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And guess what? Your little affair isn't even the most disgusting part of all this." She froze, her face draining of color. "What did he tell you?" "Everything," I said, stepping closer. "How you ran to him because you were lonely. How Samantha encouraged the whole thing because she wanted me out of the picture. And let's not forget the cherry on top. Your sister sleeping with the same man you were cheating with. Quite the family legacy you've got going. Emily's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes filling with tears. Tom, don't, I growled. You don't get to cry your way out of this. Not now. She sank onto the couch, her body shaking. I never wanted it to go this far, she whispered. I was so angry at you. So confused. Angry at me? I interrupted, my voice rising. You're blaming this on me now? Unbelievable. Her tears spilled over, but I didn't care. I was beyond feeling sympathy for her. Tom, please, she begged. I'll do anything to fix this. I'll cut off Brandon. I'll never speak to Samantha again. Whatever it takes. I laughed bitterly. You think this is something you can fix with promises? You're delusional. She reached for me, but I stepped back. Tom, please, she said, her voice breaking. I love you. No, I said flatly. You love control. You love playing the victim when things don't go your way. But love? You don't even know what that means. Her sobs filled the room, but I didn't stop. Here's how this is going to go, I said. You're going to pack your things and leave. Today. And don't even think about fighting me on custody or the house. You've lost any right to this life. Tom, no, she cried. Please, don't do this. Do you think I care what you want? I snapped. You made your choices, Emily. Now you can live with them. She fell to her knees, clutching at my legs. Don't take everything away from me, she sobbed. I'll do anything. Just don't ruin my life. I stared down at her, feeling nothing but cold resolve. You already ruined it yourself. I pulled away from her grip, heading for the door. Oh, and one more thing, I said, turning back. You might want to have a chat with Samantha, because when I'm done with Brandon, she's next. Emily's face crumpled, but I didn't stick around to watch. I had a meeting with Brandon, and this time it wouldn't end with just words. That night, I parked outside Brandon's apartment, waiting for him to come home. When he finally appeared, I stepped out of the car, blocking his path. Tom, he stammered, holding up his hands. Please, don't do anything crazy. Crazy, I said, advancing on him. You haven't even seen crazy yet. He tried to back away, but I grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. You think you can destroy my life and walk away unscathed? Think again. Tom, please, he begged, his voice shaking. I'll do whatever you want. Just don't hurt me. I leaned in close, my voice low and deadly. You're going to quit your job. You're going to leave town. And if I ever hear your name again, I'll make sure you regret it. He nodded frantically, tears streaming down his face. Okay, I'll leave. I swear. I released him, letting him collapse to the ground. Good, I said, turning away. You've got 24 hours. As I walked back to my car, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This wasn't the end. Not for Emily, not for Samantha, not for anyone who had betrayed me. But it was a start. And from now on, I'd be the one pulling the strings.